I think that a lot of my worldviews and a lot of my, I do think that the human mind finds cope. I do think the human mind adopts a framework which allows them to exist inside of their reality most comfortably. But a lot of my frameworks and a lot of the reason I come to the conclusions I come to when I say like life is constant and endless wars, because I believe there's nothing I can do that's going to make any of these people happy besides die or shut up. And then you have to make a decision if you're going to do that. Is there anything they could do to make you shut up?
No, and you've reached that point now where there's nothing you could do that's going to change anybody at this point. Nothing.
And even if they were to come to you right now, I mean, I don't know how they could possibly try. If they were to come to you and say, Michael, please keep doing your podcast, but don't talk about the presidency. Is there anything they could do that would make you shut up?
Andrew, I'll tell you. 6 years ago, I wrote a book. It was a business book. I owed my publisher another book. Book did well.
Yeah.
So I go there. They say, we want you to do a political book. I said, okay. He said, what are you going to call it? I said, it's just like this. What are you going to call it? I didn't even think. I said, Mafia democracy. What do you mean? I said, our government is a mafia now.
Gee.
You guys cleaned it up off the street. Now they're in Washington.
100%.
Okay, great. They give me a big advance. I go home. I start writing a book. I get into like 4 chapters, 5 chapters. I turn to my wife. I say, why am I doing this? They're not bothering me. They're leaving me alone. I says, this is real stuff. People are going to get upset with me. I went back to my publisher. I gave him back the advance. I said, not doing this, right? Cut to 2 years ago. I said, I have a responsibility to do this. I can't shut up. I see what these people are doing. Yeah. They're liars. They're thieves. They're hypocrites. I can't do it. I go and write the book. I call it Mafia Democracy. Andrew, lay everything out exactly how I could see in a second exactly what they did. It's all about money and power.
Yeah.
I see what they're doing, right? I write the book. Book's a huge success. People come in. Now we see it. Now we get it. Now we understand what they're doing. And I'm going right down the middle. Democrat, Republican. This is the system that we've created now. Yeah. You got a bunch of weak people in office that are bleeding you dry, you know? But people don't understand. They're raising taxes. What do you mean raising taxes? Everything we do is taxed.
Right.
Everything, from the clothes we wear to the food we eat to the car we drive to the insurance we get to our health, everything is taxed.
Yep.
Don't you understand this? They raise it. All they do is tax us. But this is the system now. But they don't live the same way. These people are wealthy. They don't know that you're going to the grocery store and paying 20, 30, 40, 50% more because they don't do that.
And they don't care.
And they don't care about you. You think they care. And if they're paying you with your own money. They're charging you more and then you don't even understand the system.
Yep.
You know, so what's the cure? Vote these people out of office.
Yep.
Get rid of them. Don't let them lie to you. You know how many people die? Listen, I'm saying this, I get in trouble. Our president has blood on his hands.
Yeah.
Andrew, if you know human trafficking is coming over the border, real human trafficking, not the BS with you, real human trafficking is coming over that border. Opioids and fentanyl coming over the border. You know, I saw the Border Patrol agents. They showed me a block of fentanyl, maybe 3 times the size of this. Mm-hmm. They said, Michael, this can kill the entire world population. Wow. It's coming over the border and we can't stop it. You know this? You're the president of the United States. You know this, and you don't close the border immediately? I had a kid drop dead in my house. He had a bit of fentanyl this big, like a drop of a pinhead, within 10 minutes, dead in my house.
Insane.
You know this is happening, and you don't put a stop to it. You know there's human trafficking. You're in charge of this whole country, the welfare of people that trusted you and put you in office. You don't stop it immediately? What more evidence do you need?
And this is where the whole conversation gets spiritual because
but you see, but then they get mad at us for talking about it because it's the truth and they can't accept that.
That's right. They want to shoot the messenger.
No.
Yeah.
You know, but how do you just sit there and say, well, you know what, my life is good, I'm just going to keep quiet? I can't do it.
Because you'd have to be soulless to do it.
I can't do it.
And this is where the whole conversation gets spiritual because when I say the people in charge are demonic, they're 100%
demonic.
They worship Satan, whether they admit it or recognize it or not. They do.
It's absolutely demonic.
And people say, "Oh, you're crazy. What do you mean? About a bunch of Satan worshipers?" The scenario you just described could only be accepted by a Satan worshiper, someone who has no concern for anything but themselves. And if you look at the Satanic Church, a lot of it is down to just absolute selfishness. The Satanic Church will teach you all that matters is you and how you feel.
Exactly.
And no, you don't have to care about anyone else. If it makes you happy, that's fine, which is, we can tie back to our earlier conversation about hedonism and people being obsessed and self-obsessed. This is why they push certain things they push. This is the reason why they try and convince the whole population they're depressed. Depression is a low energy state. You're not going to go to revolution if you're depressed. If you're depressed, you're obsessed only with how you feel. You're self-obsessed now. You're a depressed person. You don't want to go outside. You don't want to do anything. You don't care about the world.
Right.
You only care about you. You're worshiping Satan if you're going to sit there depressed. I don't care if I'm depressed. I have things to do, and I am not going to allow people I care about to be at detriment. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I'm a full-grown man. I have things to do. So they're trying to push all of this, and it is demonic and it's satanic. And once you go down this rabbit hole, it's amazing. You can start with fiat currency, or you can start with the false democracy. You can start with all these things. It has to end up at God, because there has to be an equal and opposite force. There's so much evil in the world. There has to be an equal and opposite force, which is God. And the only thing that can actually fix a society and maintain a society is the belief in something bigger and more powerful than a government or money, is God. And this is why you look at the countries who have thrown God away, how quickly they're declining, as opposed to the countries who still have God and still believe in God. And this is why it's such an important, it's a spiritual battle. It truly is spirit. It's good against evil. It's that simple.
100%.
It's good people against evil
100%.
people. And another thing that's always given me comfort is you understand that truthfully all you own is your soul anyway. I mean, I can tell you from experience, and you probably know better than me. You don't own that car, you don't own that house, you don't own the money in that bank. Piss off the government and you will see how quickly you don't own a thing.
Right.
A judge who you've never heard of will stamp a piece of paper you've never read and you are on your ass. That's it. You don't own anything besides how you feel when you look in the mirror. That's all you own. The rest of it is garbage. You own your body, perhaps if you don't let them inject you with anything, and you own your soul if you get to stand up for what you believe in and what you say. I get to look in the mirror and go, yeah, maybe I got myself in trouble, but I meant what I said. I meant every word I have ever said, even if now I retrospectively disagree with some of the things I've said because I've grown as a person. At the time I meant it, and I meant what I said, and I said it. It is what it is. You can take my cars, you can take my house, you can take all my money. Doesn't matter. Because that's what you truly own. They have people so obsessed with this idea of owning this garbage they don't own anyway. And that's the thing, because that's how they force you to comply, right? If you tell too much truth on Twitter, you lose your job. You lose your job, you lose your mortgage. Can't pay the house. You're gonna lose everything. Right? So they have people self-obsessed with all of these unimportant things that they don't even really even own.
Yeah, you're right.
And this is where spirituality is so important. I find it heartbreaking that America, which is supposed to be the largest and most powerful Christian country, Christian, right? You will get more respect for George Floyd than Jesus Christ. I find it heartbreaking that you can mock Jesus in the open.
Yeah.
I find it, yeah, free speech, blah, blah, blah. There's free speech, but no, I don't think you should be walking around insulting the God of the country you live in. You can't do that in an Islamic country. You can't do that in nearly any religion's country. Only in these first world Christian nations are they going to allow their prophets to be mocked and say, well, no, oops. They'll put up satanic statues in churches.
Yeah,
they did
that's
this.
fine.
And the guy, a Christian, destroyed the statue. He got charged.
Yeah.
He got charged.
Andrew, it's happening every day in America. You could tell you, God forbid you say something against a transsexual.
Oh yeah. That's the real religion.
Absolutely. But talk about Jesus, talk about God, nobody cares.
That's right. The real religion is LGBT. You can't destroy that flag.
Can't destroy it.
You can't talk bad about that.
That's become a religion. You're right.
It is.
They make it sacred.
Absolutely. You have your priests and priestesses. You have your religious doctrine, and they're trying to convince everybody to join. You know, I don't know why anybody thinks this is controversial, and I'm sure this is going to get me canceled for the 58th time, but luckily I do not care anymore, so do it. When they say the gays are after your kids, no, we're not. Of course they are, because they can't have their own. Mm-hmm. So how do they have a future of a movement unless they get your kids? They need you as a straight man to dedicate his life to a woman, to have children, to raise those children, to pay for those children, to protect those children, to provide for those children, to be responsible for those children all those years so that they can come along and psyop those kids into ending your genetic bloodline and doing whatever they want. They want your kids. Of course they do. There's no other kids to take. Of course they want your kids. And the reason they try and get the kids is because their ideology is such bullshit that they have to go after the young, impressionable minds. They can't go after a 30-year-old who's lived in a normal world. No, they have to go after a child.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to, once again, tell your children to not adhere to these things.
No,
you're not allowed. That's
in trouble.
That's a crime. They're going to send your kid to a school, which is effectively an indoctrination camp now, and they're going to indoctrinate them with this garbage. I saw a video on YouTube, and it was a dad trying to argue with his 2 daughters about LGBT rights or something, what they learned in school, and he was trying to fix them. And I guess he thought the video was a wholesome video because he was fixing their minds and, look, this is what we have to do. It pissed me off, and it wasn't even me. I was like, they've poisoned your kids' brains. You're sitting here trying to fix it. Why fix it? Why is this happening? I'd take them out of school the same day. Absolutely. It's insane that you're even having to sit there and do this.
I'd be in jail already.
100%. It's crazy.
And they're starting in the 5th grade. No, I'm sorry. They're starting when they're 5 or 6 years old. They're putting this trash in public schools, teaching them about LGBTQ, or whatever the heck they call it, gays and everything. And they're even talking about sex when the kids are 5 years old.
That's right. That's
5 years old. I can't, Andrew, it drives me crazy. I mean, I've seen a lot of garbage on the street, but I've never seen anything like this. This is more demonic.
This is demonic. And this is more evil than anything you see on the street. On the street, there's a guy involved in some business. He's involved with bad guys. He's a bad guy. Something happens, whatever. Children trying to learn about math. It's truly demonic. The agenda is completely demonic and satanic. And it's anti-human. The reason they push this LGBT stuff so hard is because it's anti-human. It will reduce the population. People won't have kids. It'll divide the genders further. It will attack masculinity. It ticks a lot of boxes for them. What they want is they want machines in charge of everything. They want AI to come along. They want robots in charge. They want a slave class of people below the robots, and they want to tell the robots what to do. Things are bad enough now. Imagine when the police force is robotic.
Yeah.
Now, what are you going to do then? Terminator, Skynet.
It's coming.
It's coming. It's going to be over for humanity. We're in a large last period where people can stand up and say, we will not accept. And they're still sitting there going, maybe it'll be okay. It's not going to be okay if you don't do anything about it. It's funny because you talk about God. One of the guys I live with is a very devout Christian. We talk about
which you once were, right?
Well, I was an atheist.
Okay.
And then I educated myself. And then I was a Christian for a while. But I think I reverted to that because I was raised Christian. So I was like, I believe in God again, so I'm a Christian. And then I read the Bible, and then I read the Quran. And then I found infinity with Islam. And it's a very interesting conversation because in a lot of ways, they're a lot more similar than people realize. They're actually very similar. But I don't feel qualified to discuss Islam like that because it's a very complicated religion, and I'm a revert. I'm only 2 years in, and I'm learning. But one of the guys who lives with me is a devout Christian, and we often have these conversations, and we talk about these things.
And your brother's a Christian.
My brother's a Christian, that's right. And he says, when we talk about these things, he goes, Jesus is coming back. It's fine. Jesus is coming back. So I'm like, but Christian nations need to stand up for themselves, and you need to do something, you need to fight. And he goes, but Jesus is coming back. And I said, I don't prescribe to that particular mentality. And it reminds me of a story from my dad.
Well, let me ask you a question. When you say you don't prescribe to that mentality, do you not believe Jesus is coming back, or you just don't believe in that mentality you just described?
I do believe, let's say I believe Jesus was coming back. That wouldn't mean I don't take action. That wouldn't mean I just wait.
I agree with that.
I don't agree with it's going to be fine. It'll be fixed by Jesus. No. I'll give you a quick example. My father was a world-class chess player. He was a professional chess player. I used to go with him to chess tournaments. We were at a chess tournament. I think we were in Chicago, Illinois, and I must have been about 8 years old. And Azerbaijani grandmaster turned up, and he looked visibly shaken. And he's from Azerbaijan, so he was not used to driving on ice. And he came in, and he looked visibly shaken, and my dad and his friends were standing there, all the chess players, and he said, what's the matter? And he goes, God just saved my life. God just saved my life. And we were like, what happened? He said, I was driving on the bridge, and I lost control on the ice, and I was heading towards the edge of the bridge, and the car wasn't responding, and I just closed my eyes, and I prayed to God, and I opened my eyes, and I stopped just before I went off the bridge. I broke the barrier. I nearly went off the bridge. God saved my life. God saved my life. And I remember my dad said, maybe God saved your life, but I wouldn't have taken my hand off the wheel. And that was his mentality. And I remember him saying, I was only 8. I remember him saying that and walking off. And I talked to him about it on the way home. What does that mean? He goes, well, God has a plan. That's great. But I'm going to do my very best while I'm here. And God will allow me to either succeed or he won't. So we could sit here and say, Jesus is coming back to save Christian nations. Yeah, perhaps. Perhaps you should stop letting yourself get punked all day and stand up and do something. Perhaps. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But it truly breaks my heart when these things are happening.
Well, no, you're right, because faith without works is not, it's meaningless. But let me ask you, very interesting, because you said you believe Jesus is coming back,
Yeah.
and yet you're Islam.
So does Islam.
They do?
Yeah.
So they believe that Jesus is the Son of God?
Yeah.
Okay.
They believe he was a messenger.
They don't believe he's the Son of God?
I have to be, I don't want to say anything incorrect, because if I say anything incorrect, the Muslim world jumps all over me. But they do believe he was a messenger. They believe he was a prophet, along with Muhammad and along with Moses. They believe in a lot of the same things. I guess the very simplistic way to understand or explain Islam is they believe in the Bible. They believe in all of it. They just wrote one more book afterwards by one more messenger, Muhammad, peace be upon him. And in his book, he said, Christians are right. Everything's right. But there's also this part. That's the very simplistic view of it. I don't think the problem is Islam versus Christian. I don't think the problem is God versus God. I think the main problem with the world today is godless versus believers. I think if you have somebody who believes in God, all the religions have a basic tenet of look after your family, do the right thing. God is watching. There is sin. There are some things more important than money. You know, like in Islam, we don't have usury, for example. There's no interest allowed. It says in the Quran, if you have a society based on interest and based on debt and based on banking, you're going to be controlled by evil. It says in the Quran in the 14th century. So like there's certain, you have spiritual beliefs. And if you don't have any spiritual belief, you're only going to worship money. There's nowhere else to go, right? And if you worship money, you're corruptible. So I think that people who are spiritual as opposed to people who are atheistic is the main problem, because the atheists aren't even atheistic. They worship LGBT, money, government, feminism, abortion, whatever insanity. They have their religions. They're just evil. So there's no such thing as an atheist anyway. They just have completely insane religions. Right. I believe that people who believe in God versus people who don't is the main problem. I think a lot of the confusion, though, about Islam is a lot of the problems in the Western world are from migrants, perhaps, or from people who are from Islamic countries. So people have a problem with Islam, which I can understand. But I would argue that the problem there is not Islam. The problem is third worlders versus first worlders. Some of the first world Islamic nations are the most beautiful places on earth. Bahrain, Kuwait, Dubai, United Arab Emirates. These are gorgeous places with no crime. And you're going to see with no tax. And the tallest buildings in the world, perfect roads, 0% tax rate.
No tax.
Yeah, no tax. Explain that, government. And they built these beautiful places and everyone's safe and society functions and everything's gorgeous. Obviously, you have third world Islamic nations with problems. You can go to Africa and find third world Christian nations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you will see how they treat women. People say, oh, Islam's bad to women. We'll see how they treat women in Africa and Christian nations.
You're right.
It's third world versus first world.
Let me ask you, is there a reason you were drawn more to Islam than Christianity?
I read both books. I don't know if it was my time inside of in Islamic countries. I felt God. I felt it. I don't know how else to say it. I felt it. I felt it more when I went to the mosque. I felt it when I was in an Islamic country. I felt it. And I've analyzed this about myself heavily because I believe that feedback is how you get good at anything. People think practice makes perfect. That's a lie. Feedback makes perfect. And I was actually discussing this with somebody who was talking about my podcast. He says, oh, your podcasts are very good. And how do you talk so well? And I said, well, he goes, you must be practicing. I said, I don't practice because I'm 37. You're 42. You've been practicing longer than me. So how come I can speak better than you can? Because I watch myself back and I analyze. I learn new words. Feedback. Feedback is how you get good at something. So I try to analyze my own state of mind all the time. And I try and work out, why did I feel like an Islamic society was closer to God than a Christian society? Is it because of what's in the book? Or is it because of the society I'm in? Is it because of the society? Maybe. And I'm just being perfectly brutally honest here. Maybe when I look at religion, I say, well, if a religion, what's the primary goal of a religion? Is it to save souls? Yes. But also, wouldn't you argue the primary goal of religion is to preserve a society to a degree? If Islam can preserve Islamic societies, if women are women, if men are men, if even in war zones, even you can look at the worst countries on the planet today, they're Islamic countries, if they're still all praying, they're still all with their wives, they're still all feeding. God is the only thing they've got. They don't have anything else. They're not afraid to die for what they believe in. God is all they've got left. You know what's interesting? Someone said to me, they said, imagine when you look at movies and you see a post-apocalyptic Christian country, like, something's happened. You see riots, you see looting, you see all these things, right? He goes, there's a bunch of Islamic countries right now that are already post-apocalyptic. You don't see any of that because they believe in God. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's just I felt it hold society together. And I'm not going to sit here and argue that I'm right. I'm not going to argue against Christianity at all. I respect Christianity. I was raised Christian. I have absolute respect for Christians. My brother's a Christian. I'm not going to sit and say that I'm right and anyone else is wrong. I'm just saying perhaps it's as simple as if I send my children to school in Dubai, 99% of the problems we've talked about, I don't have to worry about anymore. Maybe it's that simple. It's like, okay, boom.
Let me tell you the one thing that separates Christianity that's scary to everything else on earth, in my view. If Christians are right, and the only way to get to heaven, which I know you believe in, we believe in heaven and hell, is through Jesus Christ, then every other religion could be good. There's no question about that. But the separation is that if you don't believe Jesus is the Son of God,
that's right,
then you don't get to heaven.
That's right.
And that's scary.
Yeah.
And when I was in the hole, I kind of challenged God at that moment, because my wife was Christian, my mother-in-law Christian. They were telling me, and I didn't have time for that. But now I'm getting in there, and you know what I developed, Andrew? I developed a healthy fear of hell.
Yeah.
You're in the hole. If this is it, if this is the rest of eternity like this, only a million times worse, and even if it isn't worse, this is it.
Yeah.
I'm here alone by myself, separated from everyone I love, and this is it. Eternal nothing. I said, I need to find out what's true. And at that point in time, I had my Bible in there. I had my wife send me every book you can imagine. Christian faith, Hindu, Muslim, everything. I was reading everything. And for me, the separation was, okay, all of this makes sense. But if Jesus is the only way to heaven, and I reject that, then no matter how good I am, no matter what else I do, I'm going nowhere. This is going to be eternity for me.
That's right.
So this is the separation. And I think people have to make that choice.
It's a super interesting conversation, and I can't wait. I'd love for us to do a podcast in a couple more years when I've read them both a couple more times. And I know I have more to learn. This is on one subject where I'm 100% a student.
But remember this, the only thing I'm going to tell you, I'm sure your brother told you this.
Every day.
Everything could be right. 100%, million good people, the countries are good, everything. And you know what? You're more safe in a country. The United States is not safe anymore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Christians there, a lot of people that profess to be Christians but really aren't Christians. Because you can say you're a Christian, but if you're living in a pattern of sin, if you're not living like a Christian, you're not a Christian. Doesn't matter. But that's the one separation.
I understand.
And that's important, and that's something you really need to figure out and think about, because if he is the only way to heaven, no matter how good you are, no matter how great the country is, doesn't matter.
How religious is the mob?
How what?
How religious is the mob?
The funny thing, guys used to go to church. I grew up a Catholic from kindergarten right through high school. I was an altar boy the whole bit. But for me, Catholicism was like a subject in school. A lot of rules, a lot of regulations. You're going to hell. You don't do this. It was like, okay, I got it. Okay, but don't bother me with it right now, But yet you see guys that, maybe last night they had to kill somebody, and then on Ash Wednesday they got ashes on their head. I always thought that was kind of ironic, but you saw a lot of that. Did they truly believe? Yeah. They believed in God. Yeah. They believed in God. No question about it. But did they act that way? No.
How did they reconcile that? How did they put the two together?
I'll tell you how we reconcile it. Halloween night, 1975, I take a blood oath, and I devote my life to the Mafia, Cosa Nostra. And when you take that oath, you say this: no matter what, this comes first before anything else in my life. If your mother is sick and dying, you're at her bedside, we call you, you got to leave your mother and go there. That's the commitment you're making, right? Okay. So you're told straight out, you make a mistake, we have policy in that life. You never mess with anybody's wife, daughter, sister, mother. Death.
Yeah.
You sell drugs right now, you're going to die. During my era, you weren't allowed to deal with drugs. It was a great rule. Couldn't do it, all right? Were guys doing it on the side, sneaking around? Yeah, but you couldn't do it, right? And they tell you straight out, you break a rule, your best friend may walk you into a room and you don't walk out again because you can't violate the rules. Okay, so that's what you live by, and you get it. So that you justify certain things. Well, this guy broke the rule. I'll tell you what happened to me one night, Andrew. In that life, you're always going to be put on a spot at some point in time. So there was without getting into the whole story, because I've said it so many times, I was walked into a room one night, didn't know if I was going to walk out again. Was I scared? You bet, because I knew the experience. I was a captain at that point. I was scared. People said, why didn't you cut and run? It was robotic at that point. Hey, if this is it, this is it. You know, gonna die, I'm gonna die. I had to walk down the stairs into a basement apartment. When that door opened, I knew the setup. I said, this might be my last breath. I don't know how I didn't faint. I'm going to be honest with you. And I'm not a scary guy. I could live up to things. But anyway, I'm here. It worked out. But I get in the car with the guy that drove me there, who was my best friend, good friend. I knew him my whole life. And when I got in the car, he had driven me there. And I was ready to blast him. I was saying, you didn't prepare me for any of this, right? And he said, Mike, stop. Before you say anything, he said, this could have been real serious. You held yourself in there really well tonight. Could have been a problem. Now, he says that to me. I said, you knew that? You're driving me possibly to my death. You're my good friend. I know you my whole life. You do that to me? And he turned around, he looked at me, he said, if it was the other way around, would you have told me? And I said, no. He said, it's the life we lead, right? So, but that's, you're so programmed that even if your best friend violates something, you're gonna take that guy out. But you justify it. Well, he knew the rules, shouldn't have broke the rules. I knew the rules, tried to get away with it, didn't get away with it. The problem is there's a lot of treachery in that life. People die for other reasons, politics, the whole bit. You know, a lot of stuff happens. But you know, you justify what you're doing. So even if you're a Catholic, okay, well, listen, we both played by the rules. This guy knew it, that guy, so what I did wasn't bad. We're a disciplined society. We're men. We act like men. We're not supposed to break the rules. So you justify it. Even though the Ten Commandments, murder is murder. Well, in my case, it's okay. You can't justify it, but you do. So were guys religious? I mean, they still could have killed somebody and still believe they were religious because he broke the rule.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly what you're talking about.